And very welcome to yet another episode 13. Lucky for some, unlucky for others. Hopefully it'll be a good night for us. It's a bit of a short show tonight, just with everything that's going on at the moment. It's so hectic, and myself and Aaron just struggling to get time. We're a little late than normal this week, but we have left a day later than usual because, of course, that really, really intriguing tie last night in Ferrycarrig Park, Cork City, and coming away with a point. Fantastic result for them. Good performance from them as well. We'll talk about that later on. We're going to be talking to some of the dual stars in the league this year. Last Sunday afternoon, less than 24 hours after wins for both Peamount and Athlone, two of their players, Laurie Ryan and Chloe Moloney, took to the field with Clare ladies football to win a Munster Championship. And Diarmuid Kearney, our reporter, caught up with them after that game down in Mallow at the weekend, and he got their thoughts both on that game, which you can see on our YouTube channel, but also on the Women's National League, which we're going to share with you this afternoon. But first things first, Aaron, another week, another game, 6 games this week, a little bit of a bonus. That game, of course, left over from a few weeks ago. Welcome back. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been busy. Enjoyed the sunshine at the weekend. Obviously, it was really nice weather, getting out to watch some football. Literally stood on the just out of the tunnel, at Tolka Park, literally on the grass, watching the entire Shells Peamount game, enjoying life, and back for another exciting show where we get to delve into the week that was and sort of reflect on one big win for one side that maybe both of us probably didn't see coming after the last couple of weeks, but some interesting games of the weekend, interesting results, new manager bounce. It's been a hectic enough weekend, and as you say, the extra game midweek is always nice as well.
Absolutely, and from a point of view of everything else, the streaming, you got to see what a lot of us didn't. Shells versus Peamount on Saturday afternoon. It's becoming a bit of a recurring trait. It's almost like Peamount are going in, cutting the cords just before the game, just to make sure we can't scout them and they can keep this run going at the top of the table.
Do you know what's funny? And I spoke to James O'Callaghan off the record after I finished doing my interview, and he actually said the exact similar. He said he loves the fact that the last 2 weeks people aren't being able to see them play. They haven't been able to see what Peamount have been doing unless you've been at the game, and he started making a joke about it. But it's not great. The Peamount, obviously, when it happens once, you say okay, but there's also been trouble as well. DLR Waves this year have had issues with streamings as well, and there's been a number of occasions. And for me, when you decide you're going to start charging somebody to watch these sort of streams, the production has to be good enough. The FAI talked at the start of the year about having enhanced streamed games where they'd have the sort of setup that the Premier Division has. Haven't seen any of them happen yet. Haven't seen any announcements of them happening. But to be honest with you, with it being 2 weeks in a row, it's not good enough, Breifne, to be honest with you.
But isn't that the problem as well, though? Like, you touched on it for me, and I've been saying this for a couple of seasons now. I wanted the Women's League to charge for the games, but also reinvest some of that money back into the production quality. And they're still relying on volunteers. Where is the money going? Because I realize it's going into the clubs, it's going into the league, and it's going into the general pot. But my fear is that we're going to end up with a product that's just not fit for purpose, and we're charging for it. I think it should be a standalone product, and the profit of that, after the costs, the proper costs are met, and that cost includes the cameraman and a commentator at a bare minimum. This automatic camera, while it's okay, and in worst case scenario you'll get by on it, it's really, really not ideal when you're charging people €5 to watch a game.
I'm not picking on Shelbourne here when I say this, but I hate watching a game from the likes of Shelbourne when it's sunny, Peamount sometimes when it's sunny, because it's just so hard watching it on them cameras. But then you watch on the men's game and you're like, quality's great. I've done commentary on a League of Ireland Premier Division game this year, and like you're given a Zoom link where replays and all are played for you and things like that, and you're sort of like, wow, this is great. And then you look at what's happening with the women's game. Like, listen, I said at the start of the year when they announced they were going to start charging, I said great, but the problem is at the minute is, of the charges, how many people are actually buying the women's games separately? A lot of them are probably buying them within the season passes for the men's and things. So the money's all being tied in there. Like, I'd say the numbers just for the women alone in terms of people just buying the one game are probably quite low, because even at that, if you're just a women's fan only, you're going to buy the season pass for the simple fact of the matter that it's value for money if you watch 2 or 3 games a weekend to just buy the season instead of paying €5 per game. But like, I think we need to have something put in place, because this can't be happening. It's not good enough, because like the biggest game of the weekend and a game that turned out to potentially open the gap between second and third in the league nobody got to watch it unless you're one of the 400 odd people who were in Tolka Park. And like, I've seen people who said they bought the game and then all of a sudden, boom, it's disappointing. Like, once you're out, once you say, okay, stuff happens, when you see multiple times and multiple issues happening throughout the year, you're sort of thinking it's just not good enough. And like, you can see the production level that goes into the men's Premier Division games. Look at some of the men's First Division games. Clubs are now going away from these pixel lock cameras as well. Kerry are the latest to say, listen, no, we're going to actually do our own production. Wexford Youths and Wexford FC do one of the best productions in terms of the women's and men's game, where they've multiple cameras, they've different things. Galway have things as well. But like, you see other clubs and they're using, for the men's, they've different stuff as well than they do for the women, and when they have their own production crew, and then compared to who they have it, it's for me, it's annoying, it's frustrating. Like, it's the bare minimum that you expect if you're going to charge somebody, that you're giving them a decent service. You're not giving them a half hour service, and excuse the language, but like, that's what it felt like, and it's disappointing because you're reading the comments, and rightly so, the FAI are getting slated for. I've seen Shelbourne are getting a bit of slated for it as well, but Shelbourne identified that there was an issue and sort of reached out for support to say this is happening, and they just couldn't fix it. But like, you have to put the blame. The blame has to stop on someone.
It's not good enough, but I think it's up to the clubs to invest in that as well. And I think it's very hard to have that conversation and not mention Athlone as well, who've always had a very solid production.
Apologies. Actually, Athlone are one of the like, the one thing about Athlone, and this is the funny thing, is I don't know if it's a GoPro, but they've something behind the goals, and they show you some absolutely unique camera angles, men and women, which is great. And like, we need that. We need the, especially if you're talking about charging for a product, everything has to be good. But you're right in what you're saying, though. Cameramen, anybody who works in the stream, they should all be paid for their services as well. It shouldn't be reliant on volunteers either, because it's difficult then when something goes wrong and they take the flak and they're only volunteering. It's not really, they don't really have much of it.
Yeah, they can just go, oh, I'm only a volunteer. Whereas if you're actually paying people, I think the product will improve to a level where it will be self-sustaining and profit generating for whoever, whether it's the league or the clubs or a combination of the two. I think it's important that we don't take our eye off the ball and go, oh, it's fine, we know what's going on, we can hear it, we can see the scoreboard, or if there even is a scoreboard in certain games. I just think it's one of the best things about the league at the moment. I genuinely still think it's still one of the best things about the league, but it just needs to be better. And it can be better to where you can actually say, yeah, it's worth what you're paying for. At the moment, in certain cases, as we touched on, I don't think it is. Anyway, let's try and stay away from the negative aspects of the league and talk about some of the fantastic football that's been played. 6 games, as we mentioned, a double header, Wexford and Cork hosting each other over the last 5 days. Cork coming away with a point last night. Maybe we might start there because it's the most recent one. Johnny Murphy's going to be delighted with that. I know it took an inspired performance from Abby McCarthy in goals for Cork to maybe hold on to that point, but well-deserved. But Wexford will be disappointed not to have finished that game off and taken all 3 points.
Breifne, I'm going to go back to Saturday for a second first, and this will just tell you the difference. And you look at the team news, the team from last night as well. On Saturday, Wexford brought Kylie Murphy, Rihanna Jarrett, and Ciara Rossler off the bench. Made a massive difference. They tried to bring players off the bench last night, and Cork were able to combat them. I'm going to ask you the question because I know my answer. It was our first goal for Cork City, Shauna McCarthy. For me, it's a cross all day. What are you going with? Are you going with a shot or are you going with a cross?
We were having this discussion last night. There was a couple of us covering the game here on the website, and I think it's a shot, but I think it's a cross, but she'll never admit it. Is that fair enough? And I wouldn't either. Fair play to her. No, I'm delighted for Cork. Doesn't matter how they go in. We've seen some howlers at both ends for a couple of teams this year, and they've maybe got points when they shouldn't have got points, or vice versa. And I think they'll take it all day, every day. They've doubled their league tally for the year, 1 point to 2. I know it looks tiny and irrelevant at the bottom of the table, but when you're struggling for results and you can pull up those kind of results every now and again, and no matter whether you really 100% deserve them or not on the balance of play, you ride your luck, you get a couple of breaks that you didn't maybe expect or maybe even deserve, you get a referee's call here or there, I think you take it and you build on it. We've seen teams in recent seasons. Sligo were a great example in the first half of last year, where they got a fortuitous win in the boardroom against Peamount followed it up with a really good win down in Cork, I think, on the field of play. And again, I think Jeremy McGuinness scored the first goal in that game and probably didn't know she was even getting on target, in off the post, and maybe the keeper as well. But you get that look and it builds momentum. They turned those two results that they were fortunate into some really fine performances over the next 6 or 8 weeks, and they built up to maybe 15 or 18 points over that period. And I think maybe we won't see Cork in double figures in the next 2 games in terms of, or the next few games even for the rest of the season. It's a shorter season, obviously. But I think that bit of confidence, that bit of momentum of going, well, actually, Wexford were in the title hunt last year, and we've played them twice in the week. We've taken a point away from home. We've only been beaten by 2 goals at home. Maybe we're not as far off as the general public or the people watching the league think we are. And I think that's only got to be good for Danny Murphy and his squad down there.
Right, I'm going to pick up on something first. You mentioned goalkeeper, Abby McCarthy. She took a bit of stick earlier in the year over performances, and she came out all guns blazing last night. For me, it's great to see when a goalkeeper has a bit of a setback they can come back, and because she was down the team a little bit. Hannah Walsh was in, and sort of I'd assume confidence would have been knocked from it, but to come back in and put in a good display, I think that's really, really important from especially for a young goalkeeper. In terms of Cork, they've got DLR and Bowes in the next 2 games. I think realistically for them, it's just about building a little bit of momentum towards that All-Ireland Cup. I think for them, that's probably where they're going to have an opportunity just to get a run of games where teams will be very similar level to them. They'll be able to work on things that they've worked on in the last couple of weeks. But you're right in what you said. To get a point against Wexford, who were league challengers last year up until the final day of the season in Ferry Carrick Park as well, is a big result for Cork. And like it could be a big change. If they can go and get a result against the LOIWomen this weekend, you're sort of talking slightly different then. And like I think for them, when they played Waves at home, they sort of got off to a horrific start. Is probably the best way to say it. They were 3-0 down after like 10 minutes and game's over. Whereas I think there's a little bit of a mentality difference in that side. Definitely Ciara McNamara back in defence as well adds an awful lot to it. But like Danny's given a lot of young players chances this year as well and giving them opportunities. And it's good to see them getting a reward from Wexford, though. The inconsistency continues. It's been one of them absolutely mental seasons for Wexford. They win 1, they lose 1, draw. It just can't get any sort of consistency going at all. And you're sort of fearing now that their season is going to really peter out, that the FAI Cup, and the FAI Cup is really going to be their only competition that they have to focus on this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a strange season for them not to be in that title hunt. They're 10 points off, 11 points off Peamount with 9 games to go. It's going to be difficult to see anybody, possibly even from 3rd place down, but definitely from 5th place down, getting back into the title challenge. I'm looking at the table here in front of me. Galway United, they're currently 9 points off. Again, 9 points to go. Can I see Peamount and Shamrock Rovers dropping those points required to let those teams back in? I really can't. Let's move on from Wexford Cork for a moment, and we'll touch on it later on in the show. We'll talk about this weekend's fixtures. But if we look at maybe at some of those teams, Shamrock Rovers, they've kept their pressure on up at the top. 2-1 victory at home to a very solid Galway United side who really never know when they're beaten and will keep going to the final whistle. 2 goals either side at half time. Munya Gorman at the first and Abby Larkin at the second seem to wrap things up. But Gemma McGuinness, as she often does, battling away in midfield and probably the goal of the game, to be fair, to get them back into it 20 minutes of time, but they just couldn't find that equaliser. But Shamrock Rovers, they look comfortable now. They've really found their groove without actually being very, very impressive.
Do you know what's mad? And I was just thinking back in my head when I was looking at this game and looking at Shamrock Rovers. I don't know if you've ever seen, when I'm gonna change the sport slightly, when Conor McGregor done the boxing fight against Floyd Mayweather, and he done the press conference, and Floyd Mayweather just said something, and all his big security guards just stood around surrounding McGregor. It's like that with Shamrock Rovers, where it's like Collie says something just before half time, and all of a sudden, boom, a switch flips, because they keep scoring goals just on the verge of half time and literally just after the break. And it's like he flips the switch, the players just all of a sudden, boom, up the levels 3-4 gears, and they score goals at that. And then all of a sudden, they're putting teams on the back foot that the teams are then sort of near enough out of the game or chasing the game, and then they can sort of nearly relax back into their rhythm. Like, the thing is, let's call a spade a spade. Have Shamrock Rovers really, have they got out of second, third gear yet? Probably not. Like against Shelbourne early in the season, they were good in patches, then went drifted out of it. They'll admit they hung on for their life against Peamount at times. They'll admit that. But that was the sort of game that Collie O'Neill walks away thinking, I've robbed the point out of PRL Park here, and you walk away really happy. But the thing about it is, like, they're just continuing to push along, and like, if you're Collie O'Neill, you're more than happy, because you're probably thinking early on the season, if we might lose one or two early on, then we'll build in. But they're still unbeaten, and they're still neck and neck with Peamount so far into the season. And like, for them, it's a good, from a Galway point of view though. It's 2 losses in Dublin on the road on the Spain in 7 days against Peamount and Shamrock Rovers, and a bit disappointed in that sense, but it was always going to be difficult for them. Still having a great season though. That's the thing. Still having a very, very good season despite them 2 losses.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting time for them, all right. And I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be okay. They've been really impressive for me this year. Let's move on to the game. We might. I'm leaving 2 games to last because we got some contribution from both Peamount and from Athlone as well. So we're going to leave those 2 games kind of to last. But DLR Bows, we've seen so many scoreless draws between these sides. You almost expect it coming into the games now at this stage?
I didn't. This weekend, I actually thought Bows would come out on top, especially considering the run of form that they've been on. Made out, it scored 4 in 4 games, but the new manager effect as well, the new manager bounce as well, Laura Heffernan. It's a great result for DLR Waves, no doubt about it, considering the performances, the results that they've had in recent weeks. It backs up the Shamrock Rovers' second half display as well for them when they went out after being 4-1 down. So, like, Laura has to be happy. It's a good point on the board. They have an opportunity this week where they can potentially pick up another couple of points. But from a Bows point of view, especially what happened on the midweek game with Wexford, Athlone winning as well, it's probably a disappointing result, and it's one they may look back on, especially considering, like, realistically they're not in the fight for the top 2. Bows aren't, but they're in that fight with the rest potentially for 3rd, 4th, 5th. Where these 2 points dropped could be a massive 2 points later on in the season. But like, from a DLR's point of view, extremely happy. But also definitely be disappointed, and especially coming into the game they have this weekend, they would have liked to continue that run going, because they have a massive game on Saturday, and it's probably not the ideal preparation. Yeah,
moving through the Midlands, Athlone and the venue for Treaty's latest attempt to pick up points at the bottom of the table. It didn't go well for them. A purple patch of a dozen minutes early in the second half really put paid to their challenge, and I think it was 5 goals in the space of about 12 or 13 minutes kind of killed off that game. But it's kind of what we would have expected maybe if you'd been picking this result at the start of the season. But it's a rare one now for Treaty. It's nice that we're talking about the rare hammering versus maybe previous seasons when it was happening every week.
Tommy Hewitt had been in his bonnet after going out and losing the last couple of weeks. You can see he just seemed to have his players let out their frustration of the results that had gone by in previous weeks. Like, that's 8-0 and 7-0 they've put past Treaty United this year. Yeah, we thought them results were over for Treaty, but it was just one of them games. It seemed to be what Athlone touched, it clicked. Dana Sheriff on the score sheet again, and she's now getting back with her starting games, really growing into the game. You're looking at Scarlett Heron, another smashing young player, and the funny thing is they're not reliant on Maddie Gibson to score 4 goals in this sort of game. They've got a good spread of goal scorers, I think, which is the most important thing. Only Gillian Keenan scored 2. Otherwise, they've got 5 other goal scorers, which I think is amazing. And young Hayley Donegan, I think that's her first National League goal as well for Athlone. So from another youngster, it's good to see that more than bursting out the scene. But it's a bad night at the office for Treaty, coming in thinking if they kept it tight they'd have an opportunity, but Athlone just blitzed them, and these things will still happen. We've seen it with other teams. Like, you've even look back at a couple of years ago when Shells put 5 past Peamount when nobody expected it as well. And like, we can have these one-off results. Let's just hope it is just a one-off and Treaty can bounce back this weekend. But it's disappointing to see the margin of victory, but Athlone's frustrations have definitely come out in full.
Yeah, well, listen, one of our reporters, Diarmuid Kearney, was covering the Clare ladies winning the Munster Intermediate Championship at the weekend. What has that got to do with the Women's National League? Well, 2 girls who are going to face off this weekend did line out for Clare in that particular clash. We're going to first hear from Laurie Ryan, who was part of that Athlone victory on Saturday night. And this is her speaking second half of an interview that went out on YouTube earlier in the week. The first half is already on our YouTube channel if you want to catch it. But the Gaelic, this is about the Women's National League stuff. Let's hear what Laurie had to say to Diarmuid on Sunday afternoon.
Obviously, Laurie, you mentioned there your commitments. You're with Athlone Town as well. Big win for yourselves last night. Ends a bit of a losing streak for you. Will you use the 7-0 result last night to build a bit of momentum going forward?
Yeah, you have to look at the results that have been coming for us and be delighted with a 7-0 win, especially when you look at Treaty's previous form. They'd been really putting it up to other teams. I suppose for us, we played really well against Shells, Rovers and Bows, but we just couldn't get over the line in those games, and that's probably something last year we were getting those results, the look of the draw and the rub of the green, and this year we're playing probably a lot better and just not getting the results, so it's hard in that sense. But I think within the camp we know that we are building something really positive, and it's just about keeping the head down and pushing on now, and no better test I suppose for us than against Peamount next week to show where we're really at and how we can perform under pressure.
I suppose as the captain of the team, is your job, I suppose, in the camp to keep, I suppose, spirits high. I know, we'll say the game against Bows just not that long ago, it looked like you'd snatched a 2-2 draw, and then, you know, you can see it right at the end of the game. I suppose, is it all about just trying to keep that positive mental spirit in the camp to then go and obviously get the win against Treaty, and you're going to top of the table Peamount now next week?
Yeah, definitely. I think from our perspective, and kind of sometimes the stats don't lie in terms of how we're playing. Like last year, if you compare our possession to this year, we're winning all the possession battles, the shots, the attacks, most of them kind of stats. It's just actually getting over the line is our problem at the minute, and sometimes you go through a phase of that. And I think within the camp we are very aware that we are playing really well, and if we just cut out mistakes, that we will start to get the results. And look, it's a long season. Do you know, that's the one thing I always say as well. We're into the second round of games, a lot can happen, and we just have to kind of trust that if we keep ticking the boxes, that we'll go up the table. And you never know, like last season, like we were nowhere near the top of the table, and then in the last 4 weeks, next thing we were in a title race and we were thinking, what's going on here? So you just have to keep ticking the boxes for yourself and hoping that everything will fall into place for you.
You know, you were in the title race last year. Obviously, you came just short against Shells in the Cup final, but you won the President's Cup to start the year. But since then, I suppose the results have been the biggest issue. But look, we're only, 12 rounds into the season so far. Plenty more football, plenty more, I suppose, games for you to get up the table. Is it all just about, as you said, just trying to get those wins and trying to get the results and not let anything get past you?
Yeah, and it's a very stop-start season this year. I think for ourselves, like we had 2 games, we had a game, then we had a week off, then we had 3 games, then we had 2 weeks off. Like that all has an impact as well on getting that momentum that you'd be hoping to get. So again, we play Peamount and then we're off for 2.5 months, and we have that All-Ireland Cup. So a lot will change. Like a lot of girls will move teams, girls will go abroad, different things will happen. So I think the title race won't be decided this side of the summer, and we're just hoping that we can stay within touch and distance of it.
Are you looking forward to that All-Ireland Cup to play the teams coming down from the Ulster leagues? Yeah,
well, I think we're going up to Linfield, so that'll be a big trek up. But it's nice to play to other teams and see where we're at against the other leagues as well. I think that'll be interesting. I think our standard has gone from strength to strength in the League of Ireland in the last few years. So it'll be good to compare to the Northern League and see where we're at. I suppose looking at Northern Ireland and how they qualified for the Euros that last year, wasn't it? So they must have good players up there, and that's going to be nice to test yourself against them as well.
Final one for me, I suppose. I was talking to Chloe just before you, and you were teammates today. You're going to be up against her now next week above in Dublin. It's definitely going to be a tough battle against Peamount, they're leading the top of the table. But for yourselves, I suppose you won't be too bogged down with where you are in the table going up against them.
Oh, I think for ourselves, we always respect Peamount. We know the quality they have, but from our own point of view, you can't fear anyone in this league, and we know we have a very strong panel. I think from myself and Chloe's point of view, the last time we played up in Peamount, we actually got a 1-0 win, and I had to get a lift home with her afterwards, so that was fun for me. But look, we're definitely very good competitors when we're on the pitch, but we're probably the best of friends then when we're off it, which is great. And I think that's what you could say about a lot of girls across the league. We have very good relationships with other teams, which is brilliant as well.
Yeah, great to see Chloe there. Sorry, not Chloe. That was, of course, Laurie Ryan of Athlone Town chatting about her side 7-0 win over Treaty at the weekend. That brings us on to the last game we touched on at the start.
Just before you do, Breifne.
Yeah.
Just want to pick up on something she said, and I fully agree with Laurie. The stop-startness of the season, it is difficult at times. It's very difficult at times with the way it's been with the stagnation of the World Cup. I am intrigued to see how teams are going to cope with the All-Ireland Cup, then the break, then be back. Because as she says, it's 2.5 months between league games. It's uncharted territory. It's one that we're going to have to really pay a close attention to. Is it a case that it's too long? The All-Ireland Cup, it's only really going to be for 3 weeks for a lot of teams, and it's one of them that the stop-start nature of the season. It's probably canned a bit of momentum that at times the league has been building, and then all of a sudden it stops-start. And hopefully when the second half of the season comes back in after the World Cup, it can just have momentum the entire way through till the cup final, because like I'd love to see Athlone go on a run of results and maybe see what they do, because there's no reason why. Yes, top 2 is out of the question for Athlone. I think that's fair. But there's no reason why they couldn't get back into that 3rd, 4th place with a run of games, especially they'd still have to play Shells, still have to play a lot of teams that are in and around them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that is true of probably 6 or 7 teams just outside those top 2 at the moment. But that all remains to be seen. The other game of the weekend that we haven't specifically touched on, and we did mention at the very start in relation to the streaming and the access to watch the games, is of course that top of the table clash, Shelbourne versus Peamount. Always a cracker. Shells had won 4-1 a couple of weeks ago out in Peamount Park, and I think most people would have expected Shells maybe to win the game. It didn't turn out like that. 1-0 win. Sive Doyle, again, she's on fire at the moment with a goal to seal it 1-0 for the Peas. They're top of the table. They'll be delighted with how the season's going for them so far. Your thoughts on the game?
James was absolutely delighted after it. He was talking about like the way they're going, and like everybody else is still talking about Shamrock Rovers, still talking about Shelbourne, still talking about Wexford not picking up results, where Peamount are just being allowed to glide as they are. The top of the table, they're grinding out 1-0 wins. It wasn't the typical Shells Peamount game for me. Intensity probably wasn't as high. The heat may have played a bit of a factor in it. Nivea Burke had a good game and goal for Peamount. Shells had some chances, hit both posts. Gemma Quinn. It wasn't a game of many clear-cut chances, but like the goal itself, a lovely a corner in from Lauren O'Callaghan, and it was Sive Doyle at the front post. How she's left free at that front near post just to head in, and from then you didn't get the vibe that we were going to get lots of goals in the game. Like you look at the game when they played in PRL Park, it was 10 minutes of madness nearly from a Peamount point of view, where they give a couple of goals away after being 1-0 up, and I think composure was probably the biggest thing for them. They ground out the 1-0 win. They frustrated Shells an awful lot. It's a sort of game that Shells will look back upon and say they probably didn't put their best foot forward. From a Peamount point of view, they'll probably say they probably didn't. They probably know better than a 6.5, 7 out of 10. But they managed to grind the result out. It's the sort of game last year where Peamount will lose 2-1, or they can see the late goal and draw the game. But like, it's just the attitude. And I know we're going to hear from Chloe Moloney now in a minute, but the thing about me is the Peamount centre-backs, Chloe Moloney and Jenna Barrell. Like Jenna Barrell played in the wing last year, which is absolutely mad considering what she's doing at centre-back. She's been brilliant for them. And like I tweeted a couple of weeks ago, Chloe Moloney was a bit-time player in previous years for Peamount. She's a rock at the centre, at the heart of the defence for them now, which is massive for them. And I think the biggest thing is that her presence is so much felt that you can see how much they rely on her and how much she's grown, how much she's come on, because players like herself and Jetta, like at times they kept Jamie Thompson out of the game when they played Rovers. They kept Noelle Murray quite quiet. But the one thing I will say from a Shelbourne point of view is Alex Kavanagh was an absolute massive loss. She missed the game against Sligo, injured after coming off against DLR Waves. And in the middle of the park, you can see how much Shelbourne missed her. She picks up pockets of the ball, plays a forward 10, and they just didn't have that. And they struggled creativity-wise. And for Shells, it's a tough one to swallow against near rivals.
Yeah, absolutely. They won't be too happy with how that's gone. But I think credit goes to Peamount, and I think it shows the strength of the club, because there's an easy option when you look at it from the outside in to go Peamount United. They don't have the same resources. They don't have the same backup as some of the League of Ireland men's clubs can provide to their. Like you look at the teams around them: Shamrock Rovers, Shelbourne, Bohemians, Galway, Wexford, Athlone, DLR, UCD, kind of side by side. Treaty, Sligo, Cork. They're the only one now really that's standalone. You could put an argument out there for DLR, but they're standalone, and they were decimated at the end of last season, and they've just quietly gone about their business. They've been written off. And as we're going to hear from Clare Moloney in just a couple of moments, maybe that's exactly why they are where they are, with the reaction that they've got from those players. So maybe let's, with no further ado, just jump straight into the conversation that Clare Moloney had with our reporter, Diarmuid Kearney, after the Munster final on Sunday.
We obviously, last night, or I suppose less than 24 hours ago, you were lining up Peamount in the Women's National League against Shells. Big top of the table clash, you won it. I suppose just a 1-goal win there, but definitely a massive result for you to remain top of the table.
Yeah, Tolka Park is a massive place to go. Like, it's very hard to win there and stuff. We played them out in Peamount a few weeks ago and we lost 4-1, so we wanted to get the wrongs right. We probably didn't play well at all, but we got over the line, we got our 3 points, and that's what we went there for. It wasn't pretty, but at least we got our 3 points.
You'll take it, I suppose, 90 minutes of play yesterday evening, and now you've played another hour today. How do you manage to have the two, to manage playing Gaelic football and also playing for Peamount week in and week out?
Yeah, it can be tough because I'm obviously living in West Clare as well, and I'm driving up to Dublin. So yesterday our game was in North Dublin, so it was well over 3 hours for me. It was at 2 p.m. as well, probably in the height of that heat, which wasn't ideal. But listen, I love doing it. I love playing both. It'd be very difficult for me to pick between two. I play with them girls today, and I love all of them, and the same with the soccer girls. So it would be very hard to pick. But yeah, it can take its toll on the body, definitely. I was feeling it in the last 5 minutes there, especially the heat again. But yeah, thankfully we got the win, 2 wins. That's what I wanted this weekend anyway.
And I suppose you're top of the table. I know, reading stuff at the start of the year, they kind of said the Peamount might have been a bit written off with Shamrock Rovers coming in and Shelbourne looking for another league title, but you're top of the table. Have you really kind of not listened to any media hype of what way you perform and just play your own game this season?
Well, to be honest, and I even heard my manager yesterday saying in an interview, what was said about us at the start of the year really hurt a lot of girls in Peamount, and a lot of girls have been there for a very long time, and it kind of hurt the girls, and I think it has probably driven us on more than anything. We're not getting caught up in anything, probably Shamrock Rovers are being talked about a lot. We're happy enough to be under the radar. We're working away. We got our 3 points yesterday. We're on to Athlone now next week again, and we only have one more round of games, and yesterday was the start of it. So it's a very short season this year. So if we can just keep going game by game, and hopefully we'll have a league title at the end of the year.
You mentioned obviously Athlone coming up. Yourself and Laurie were both playing today for Clare, lining out. Your teammates today, you'll be on opposite sides of the field next week. You know, I suppose, does it kind of, when you step out on the pitch in PRL Park next week, do friendships kind of go by for 90 minutes and then afterwards you're the best of friends again?
Yeah, that's it. I play against Laurie all the time, and she's an excellent soccer player as well. And it's friendships do go out the window when we're in soccer, I suppose. But I actually don't really see her too much on the pitch in soccer because she's in midfield, I'm centre back, so she doesn't come too near me anyway. So. But yeah, no, Laurie's great, and it's actually great to have her back with Clare ladies as well. She's just after coming back in, so she'll be a huge player for us come championship as well.
And I suppose, just final question for me, I suppose on your progression, you've been a solid asset at the heart of the defence now for Peamount. How have you seen your own personal progression in the women's game in the League of Ireland over the last few years? Yeah,
I was struggling probably 2 years ago with Peamount. I wasn't really getting my place and stuff, so even since last year in November when the league finished, I just kept my training up and I just got really fit throughout Christmas and stuff. I didn't really take much time off, and I think it has stood to me a bit. I'm playing probably my best season so far. Hopefully I can keep that up now, but I'm probably the fittest I've been for soccer in a good while, and that's probably why my performances are a bit better this year. But still, obviously, always room for improvement too.
Yeah, a great chat from her. A couple of interesting points, and I did kind of pre-warn people it was coming in terms of her thoughts on maybe that reaction to how they were written off at the start of the year.
Yeah, everybody said Peamount are going to foul. Peamount are gone. Shamrock Rovers will have the Peamount license within a year when the news even was talking about. But I think for me the biggest testament is when Karen Duggan turned around and said no. That for me was the turning point, because if Karen Duggan says yes, you expect 3-4 more others might walk the door. Karen Duggan turned around and said no, and all of a sudden you're looking, Niamh Burke commits, Lauren O'Callaghan commits, Saif Doyle commits. Like, and you're then sort of thinking, okay. Then they bring in Avril Burley, they bring in Carla McManus, who unfortunately has suffered an ACL injury. We wish Carla actually the best. She had her surgery earlier this week. Then you're talking about other players that come in. You sort of think, okay, young Jess Fitzgerald in the middle of the park. It's where she was playing National League the last 2 or 3 years. The way she's carrying herself. Tara O'Hanlon obviously has made a massive step on, and you're sort of thinking to yourself, you're like, okay, pre-season comes along, you're looking, that's a decent enough lineup. Then all of a sudden, first couple of games go, you're thinking, okay, win for Peamount, another win for Peamount, another win for Peamount. But like everybody, we're guilty of it because probably we have to as well in terms of talking about the Shamrock Rovers, talking about the Shells because Shells are back-to-back champions. But like I like seeing when the likes of Peamount go under the radar because they're just turning along, doing their business, and like it's funny because the way they like to do, you'd swear. The way the Peamount attitude in recent years, it's always been, all over social media, but they're just happy to just glide away. They don't care. Like, nobody talks about Peamount for next 4 weeks. They don't care. They're just like, "Ram, we'll just take the points." And I think, for me, the biggest testament of to where they are will come not this weekend potentially. It'll probably come next weekend with the Shamrock Rovers game. But I do need to pick up on Chloe. Like, it's funny because I'd sort of said that. And at the end, when the season ended last year, and when Tegan went during the summer, I was sort of saying you'd nearly have to consider Chloe for the team of the year at centre back. I thought for the second half of last year, I thought she was brilliant. She was so assured at times when they needed a cool composure. But like, look at her; she looks extremely fit. She looks extremely, and the fact she's able to play 90 minutes on the Saturday and then go play 60 minutes on the Sunday, it just tells you. And like for someone to have the dedication to be driving from West Clare up to Dublin for training and playing games, like. You can only commend her. You can only wish that she continues to have the success that she does. Former Ireland underage international, and she's getting her rewards. And I wouldn't be surprised if she nominated for Player of the Month for me.
Interesting prediction there for Player of the Month. We've seen some strange choices. We might chat about that in a minute as well. Out of the FAI in recent days, that new Player of the Year team that they put out during the week, you have to question who was picking that because. Some of those girls have 50-plus appearances in the league before this season. Let's quickly take a look at the league table. And there we have it from our website in real time. Of course, Peamount still at 1 point clear at the top of the table. But as we mentioned a couple of times, that little gap beginning to be exposed now between second and third place. 5 points back to Shells and Bows on third and fourth place, respectively. And then another group of players, our teams back, 5th, 6th, 7th, 3 points between them, Galway, Wexford, and Athlone.
You know what's interesting?
Yep.
Peamount have only scored 19 goals in 11 games.
It's phenomenal. And you even talked about how Shamrock Rovers haven't got out of second gear all season, and yet they've 28 goals in 11 games is phenomenal as well for them. Now they have probably the biggest firepower in the league in terms of LOIWomen, with plenty of decent support acts around her. Who the next queens of the league, I think, coming up around her as well. So plenty of excitement for attacking. Talent there, but look at the against column for those top three sides. It's comfortably less than 1 goal a game.
But even look at Bows and Galway. Like that's the thing. Like previous years, you look at Bows and Galway, they're probably a lot further. Athlone haven't conceded many. Like it's mad when you think that like the top sides. Like last year, I think we went with Shells. Shells went 12 games. I think they conceded 3 goals. Two of them were in one game. I was a 12 games, 1 goal conceded, 11 clean sheets or something. Like they went on some mad run in the first half of the season. But like they were scoring buckets of goals, but like it's mad the way that the goal for is a lot lower, and even like the goals again, like it's great, and it's sort of adding to the excitement in the sense that like 1-0 win obviously for Peamount at the weekend, 0-0 with Shamrock Rovers. Other games are 1-0 or a 2-1. There's no real many, even when the top sides play each other, that we're seeing many of the 4-1s that we've seen from Shell one against Peamount. When the top sides play each other, like they're all 1-0, 1-all, 2-1. They're all really close games.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. Let's make a quick look at the top scorers in the league so far. I'm not quite sure what the graphics are doing on the left-hand side, but LOIWomen and Kate Mooney top of that particular table, 6 goals each. Can we also take it as a sign that the league is progressing, that we're not seeing ridiculous score lines after certain players, where in the early days of this league 10 years ago we would have seen players maybe with an average of a goal and half a game almost, over the course of a few weeks. Now we're seeing 50% almost as being the standard for the top strikers. Maddie Gibson, Dana Sharif both in there as well. Megan Smith-Lynch on 5 points, and then a load of players on 4. We'll go down as far as all the 4s there. So you'll see Sarah Rowe, Mia Dodd, Jenna Slattery, Abby Larkin, Chloe Singleton, Jessie Stapleton, Rihanna Jarrett, Emily Corbett, of course, on the score sheet again this week. Jamie Thompson and Gemma Quinn all in there this week.
Thompson's gone off the boil a little bit, considering when she scored her 4 goals in quite a quick succession and hasn't scored for Rovers in quite a while now. And saying that, she'll probably score at the weekend.
But no, as well as that, she's probably a more known quantity. And she scored a lot of those very early on before people were really aware of who she was or what talent she was. Now, I'm saying that the league were well aware of who she was, but in terms of actually people not maybe reacting to her, or even the players themselves knowing who she was on the field. Top goalkeepers at the moment: 6 clean sheets for Rachel Kelly, Courtney Maguire, and Neve Burke, while 5 for Eve Badana and Amanda Budden. And I think Eve Badana in particular deserves probably the mention there, because you look at how her team are doing overall. It's not been a great season for them, and yet 5 clean sheets for her, almost 50%.
She shouldn't have 5 clean sheets, and that's been honest and frank. And you gotta give so much credit for that. Like, she does not, like, that's just calling a spade a spade. Out of them 11 games, DLR should not have 5 clean sheets. That's the difference between having a top goalkeeper in your team who can pull games. Like, I'll always remember back to the first game that was out in Peamount Park a couple of years ago, the year Shells won the league on the last day of the season when Peamount lost to Galway. I'll always refer back to the game where DLR played Peamount out in Peamount Park. She saved the penalty from Tegan Ruddy. She must have made 11 or 12 fantastic saves on the night. And it sort of reminds you of like just how good she actually is. And the funniest thing is she's one of the most, how would you say, she doesn't like the limelight. She loves none of that sort of stuff. She just wants to play football. She doesn't care about anything else. She goes about her business. She leaves the club. She leaves after training or leaves after games. She'll go about her business. She doesn't care about the exposure. Doesn't care about any of that. All she wants to do is play football. And for me, realistically, when she first came into the league, you're sort of thinking, okay, she's been in Ireland International previously. It's a good coup. But the question you got to ask now is, where is she going to rank when she's finished on the top goalkeepers who've actually come through? Like, forget clean sheets, because realistically with the team she's had in the last couple of years, they weren't always going to have clean sheets, but she's got to stack up there amongst the best who've played, the goalkeepers who played in the National League over the years. Oh,
and in terms of consistently there, I think really you look at the consistency levels, and really the only one that even comes close to her in the discussion, in my opinion, is Neve Burke. I think the others, and even girls who've been racking up big numbers in terms of clean sheets, are they there because of who they're playing with, more so than actually their own contributions? I think in certain cases, and I'm quite open to correction on this, but I think you look at teams who are getting clean sheets, or keepers who are getting clean sheets when they're struggling, I think for me are the ones that you kind of have to take your hat off to and go, absolutely. And for me, she's probably top of the pile, but very, very close to Neve Burke. And then it's some distance back, I think, to almost anybody else in that discussion.
There's a couple of young goalkeepers who could in a couple of years be in that reckoning. I think if Rachel Kelly keeps going the way she's going, she'll definitely be in it. But I want to actually praise Amanda Budden, because I gave Amanda Budden awful stick last year with certain performances for Shells. But like, there's been times where she's pulled, like the Peamount game in particular, she nearly carried Rovers to that point at the end. Like, I think she made 5 saves in the last 10 minutes to keep that point. Like everybody said last year, it was just a defence she was playing with. Like, don't get me wrong, Rovers have a good team, but they don't have as good a defence as probably Shells had last year. And she's been tested quite a bit this year. And I think she's come on. I think she's took the stick that was given to her, and fair play to her. She's come along this year, and she's been very good for Rovers. And I think overall it's been a very, very good year for a lot of goalkeepers in the league. And like, it's great. There's so many young, talented goalkeepers. But the problem is Breifne, a lot of these goalkeepers could be gone in a couple of years, because the fact that there's some even better ones coming through at a younger age as well. Like, you want to Shelbourne, Kate Keane. A lot of people rave about her being one of the next best things. And you're just looking at the underage structures. And like, in this country, we're blessed to have good goalkeepers. The only problem is over the next couple of years, how are we going to keep them? Are we going to end up losing some of them to Gaelic football, to ladies football? And like, that's the problem. And like, I think a lot of credit has to go down to the clubs, to the steps they've made with goalkeepers as well over the last couple of years. We're probably still a bit away from where we need to be, but if you look at goalkeepers from 5 years ago to now, they've come on so much. And even Nemo, Nemo's a 5-10 times better goalkeeper than she was 5 years ago.
Yeah, even though she was in international squads back then. And I think since she's made a retirement decision with the international team, I think she's become more calm. She's become more secure in her own abilities. And she's really been impressive for me over the last few seasons. I think she's been a rock at the back for Peamount, and probably a major part of the reason as to why we haven't seen, despite the turnover in defence for Peamount over recent seasons, we haven't really seen much of a difference in the performances that they have in front of her at that. Let's move on anyway. They are also in action this weekend, of course. Another set of fixtures down for decision on Saturday afternoon. Some big games there. We've got Bows and Shamrock Rovers, of course, the traditional Dublin derby. Peamount and Athlone, of course, Laurie versus Chloe, part of that narrative. Galway United, they host Shelbourne, while Treaty hosts Sligo Rovers in a game that both sides will be eyeing up to get another win. They both had reasonably solid Mays. Can they start June off in the right way as well? And of course, DLR make that journey down to Turner's Cross as well. So 5 big games there. Wexford, after their big week, 2 games in 4 days, they get the weekend off. But it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Game of the week for you?
It's tough. Probably. I don't know, because the Bows and Rovers was the one. The Bows and Rovers is the one you'd say normally it is. Then you've got Galway and Shells. The history of what happened with Galway and Shells when they played in Tolka Park. Athlone are looking for another bit of respite and looking to put a bit of a dent in Peamount. Like, there's so many.
I think every game, for the first time in a long time, every game
means so much.
Both two sides are going into that game believing they can actually beat their opponents. And I know it happens a lot in 2 or 3 games a weekend, but for it to be in a case in every single game this weekend, I think I'm really looking forward to what this weekend brings. I think any team could win any of their games this weekend.
It's funny. I'd probably if you were to nail me and say give me your 5 predictions for the 5 games, I'd probably give you them right.
Let's do it.
No, because I wouldn't be confident of getting. I wouldn't be confident of getting 3 right. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I wouldn't be confident. That's the problem. And normally there's some weeks where you're like, all right, I'll get 4 right. There'll be one that might be tricky. But the problem is you could pick any result this weekend, and it could be anything. And that's the best part of it. I think, like, realistically, I think the game that's going to have the most eyes is going to be Bows and Shamrock Rovers, for the fact that it's the first time they played in Dailymount. It's the only side that Bows haven't taken points off. And I hate to say this, as much as I like the lads and I get on really well with the lads, it's going to be extremely difficult to see them doing it this weekend. And, like, you're looking at the Treaty Sligo game. Can Treaty bounce back after the big loss, or will Sligo get another win? And then, like, DLR Cork are going in that off a bit of a high with that draw away from home against Wexford. And then again, so are DLR with a result they probably thought they might have nicked against Bows. And, like, everything's to play for all weekend. I do suspect, though, the top 2 will win this weekend, and the other games could really be anything.
Could we see a situation, I know it's a lot of games to go, but could we see a situation where Shamrock Rovers go through the whole season unbeaten but don't win the league?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, like, there's no doubt when they play Peamount next week that they'd have learned so much from that Peamount game in PRL Park. They'll have learned so much. They'll have learned massively from the Shelbourne game. Like, there's no reason why they can't. Like, the only thing you're going to look for from a Peamount point of view that's probably a bit of a downside for Peamount is the fact that they still have to go to Wexford. They still have to go to Wexford, still have to go to Galway, still have to go to Shamrock Rovers. So they've got a couple of difficult away trips. But the thing is, last weekend they clocked one of the biggest away trips off their marker in terms of getting a result against Shelbourne. Like, they'll be confident when they play everybody. But the thing is, realistically, we're probably looking at another stage that I can't see Shelbourne coming back into it, just because the fact that I can't see Peamount and Rovers dropping that many points. Yeah. I can see them probably potentially drawing against each other, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do draw against each other and Peamount and Rovers go down to the very late stages of the season unbeaten, and then anything's to play for. But I definitely can see this race going to the last day of the season, or the second last day of the season. It's
definitely probably the most competitive sporting competition in the country in terms of how many teams going into this realistically have a chance of winning the league, and not just on paper, but actually getting to the last day of the season. How often have we seen 2-3 horse races going into the last or second last round of games, like before at the end of the last season, down to the last 2 games? So anything to play for over the next few weeks.
this upcoming transfer window is going to be the most important transfer window going, because I can imagine Shamrock Rovers are getting the checkbook out, see who they can nabble off teams. Teams are going to need to strengthen. Shelbourne are definitely going to need to strengthen. Peamount are going to need to try and get one or two from somewhere. But like, that's what it could come down to, just who has the ability to get that extra player or two in the door in the summer that could make the big difference.
Of course, we could see a few coming in from scholarships in the States as well. Girls coming back. I know we spoke about Amanda McQuillan on the show recently. Interesting to see if she gets back between the sticks for Shells over the coming weeks. But lots to play for in the coming weeks. Where are you going to be at the weekend?
I'm not fully sure yet. I will definitely be at Bows and Rovers. I don't know if I'll get a second game in just yet. I'd like to, if I can get the Peamount. I'd love to get the Peamount. I'm not sure yet, but I'll definitely get the Bows and Rovers on Saturday afternoon. And if not, I'll watch another game late in the evening.
Before I let you go, we might just quickly run through. I know it's a couple of weeks away yet, but just let me bring it up here in front of the screen. Is just the Avenir Cup fixtures came out during the week. Avenir Cup, I'm calling it that. I'm not sure what the technical term is, but it's the Avenir Sports.
It's the Avenir Sport All Ireland Cup.
There are the first round of fixtures. Some interesting games in 2 weeks' time. Given it's a kind of a mid-season competition, might be missing a couple of players from certain clubs who are playing or just attending the World Cup.
There's talk that there's only going to be 4 players from home base in the initial squad that's going to be announced by Vera next week. That's what the talk is at the moment. The talk is it's going to be Tara O'Hanlon, Abby Larkin, Anya O'Gorman, and who was the other one? It wasn't Jessie Stapleton. Who am I missing? I'm missing someone obvious. Tara, Abby, Anya. Oh, it's gone out of my head. This talk is 4. That was John Fallon was reporting in the Irish Examiner. There's only going to be 4 home-based players in the squad, and like there won't be many missing. But the thing is, the Avenir Cup will be almost over before the World Cup even kicks off. The final is due to take place the 16th of July, so it's 4 days before Ireland's opener. But look at the 4th fixture down, Breifne. It'll be a completely different game to what it will be on the 10th of June.
Yeah.
It'll be a completely different game. I think the two sides will probably play slightly different lineups as well. And like DLR, the other thing they're looking at is Cork and DLR playing again twice, 2 weeks in a row in Turner's Cross as well. Some big trips go as Galway going up to Linfield and like.
Yeah. It's a nice. I really like the idea of the competition as a kind of a Satanta Cup for the girls, effectively, where they get the opportunity, because a lot of these players wouldn't get the opportunity to play against teams from other jurisdictions because they don't qualify for Europe. So the likes of Cork, Galway, Treaty, Sligo, who, let's be honest, are not going to be in the European shake-up, getting this opportunity to play against teams from other jurisdictions in competition. I think we'll see a lot of changed sides, though. I think we'll see a lot of players getting opportunities that they might not get in the league through this competition, and a lot of the kind of the top line and the first line players rested through it, but it remains to be seen how that's going to go. That's it for the week, Aaron. We'll wrap it up there, and we will, suppose, look forward to another exciting weekend's football as we get closer and closer to that mid-season break in 10 days' time ahead of the Avenir Cup into the mid-season break, I suppose, really. Chat to you next week, I suppose.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
To Diarmuid, who helped us with the interviews with Chloe and Laurie earlier in the show. Thank you so much to him and to the girls for making themselves available and speaking to him down in Mallow on Sunday afternoon. We'll be back with you again next week, probably at a slightly earlier time. That other show that we're up against at 9 o'clock in midweek, Love Island, is back on the cards. So we'll be trying to avoid taking your eyeballs away from that in real time, but we will be back with a full show next week, probably 8 p.m. on Wednesday. We'll let you know on social media ahead of time. Talk to you then.